So that brings us to our really fun morning panel discussion, which is streaming video legislation, what's next, with State Representative Joan Meschino. So I'll give Joan's bio here. So State Representative Joan Meschino is the state representative for the 3rd Plymouth District, which includes Cohasset, Hingham, Hull, and North Scituate. Emphasis on the North Scituate. Joan serves on the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities and Energy, Joint Committee on Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure, Joint Committee on Export Development, and Joint Committee on Advanced Information Technology, the Internet, and Cybersecurity. She was appointed to the Metropolitan Beaches Commission and the Ocean Advisory Commission. She is also a co-chair of the Mass Legislative Climate Alliance Caucus, and she serves as a board member of the Massachusetts Caucus of Women Legislators, where she works alongside her fellow legislators to encourage and support women in government and pursue women's economic development. Joan is a seasoned public servant. She was elected to 2 terms as a selectman in Hull and served on many town committees, as well as regional boards and statewide commissions. She served as Hull's representative to the Metropolitan Area Planning Councils and was elected by her peers to its executive committee for 10 years. She is a leader in the legal community as well as in her local community. Joan was honored with a 2014 Top Women in Law Award by Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly. Joan is a longtime active member of the Women's Bar Association and is a member of its Emeritus Board. While serving as a state representative and as a member of its, while serving as a state representative, Joan was selected in 2019 to participate in the Council of State Governments Henry Toll Fellowship Program, one of the nation's premier leadership development programs for state government officials. And most importantly, guys, she was the lead house sponsor for H130, which aims to support community media centers like us. So, with further ado, State Rep Joan Meschino.
So you want us to sit?
Have a seat.
All right, I'll have a seat. I'll put that there.
I'll stand next to you.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Well, good morning, everyone. No, I need to hear it. Come on. Good morning. Thank you. I opted for the water instead of the coffee. No, it's my absolute delight and pleasure to be here with you this morning. And thank you for. I hate hearing the bio. I told the Westford crew, I think every time I hear the bio, I always feel like, do people think that I was following a cow around a path on my career? But it does speak to a lot of the skill sets that you bring forward in all of your lives, and I think that's something you all share as well. And it's a commitment to public service that really, I think, uplifts us all. So it's nice to be here with you and with people who are equally dedicated to public service. I did just want to point out, this time I'm not alone today. In the back is my Chief of Staff, Jordy Enoch, and she is fantastic. She's in charge of me, and so if you get a chance, say hello to her, say thank you, because she has to she takes me home. But do get to know her. Knowing the staff sometimes is actually way more important than knowing the state rep, actually. I don't think that Senator O'Connor is able to join us today.
Okay.
I wasn't 100% sure. I know he's on the dash, and I know I'm not sure that Rep. DeCoste was able to join us today. But I did just want to give them both a shout out because they also represent these districts, and they are friends to community media as well. We all avail ourselves of your services. We all appreciate it, and so collectively we all send our warmest welcomes from Beacon Hill. So I thought what we would do is just start off with a little bit of a cheerlead here. I want to congratulate you. I want to impress upon you as we're having this conversation today. We had a great success in the legislature this current session. And I know we didn't get our bill across the finish line, but I just want to say out loud, all of your work really created a lot of buzz, highlighted the bill, really elevated to the consciousness of leadership. And even though we didn't quite get it across the bill, I want you to keep in mind as we're having this conversation today that legislation, essentially we're proposing to update the Mass General laws, which should be done thoughtfully and intentionally and deliberately. and it sometimes happens a little slower than we like, but legislation is evaluated to make sure it's relevant, it's timely, and it's vetted. And that shouldn't be we shouldn't be underestimating that. Just because we all get it doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do to bring other people's along. And you did that. And I just want to start out by saying, as we have this conversation, that you really got it pretty far down the road, and that we have a really solid foundation. So I should just want, as we're sort of going through and talking about it, I just want to make sure that you guys all had that in your mind's eye. What I thought we'd do is, David said that we have 80 minutes. I am not going to talk that long. Please don't make me talk that long. But what I thought we could do is just talk a little bit about bill drafting, and give just a high-level overview to make sure everyone understands the mechanisms of House 130. We had a lot of questions about that last time in the first session. We can talk a little bit about the legislative process and the legislative strategy that we've employed. Make sure everybody sort of gets where we're going and how we're doing it, and then just let you know where we are at right now. And then, but really what I want to talk about is looking to the future, if that's okay with everybody. As we go along, I just please feel free to ask questions, because they kind of bucket nicely into 3 sections. And so as we, as I'm making my remarks, it worked really well last time to have questions, and there were tons of questions. And I know I can count on John, so, but I want to hear from all of you, because I talk to him all the time. So when you're going through this, I want to ask you to keep 2 things in mind. The title of this bill doesn't help any of this. And I want you, as we're discussing this, I want you guys, you're the creatives, right? I want you guys to be thinking about what the title of this bill should or could be. And when we get to the end, what I really want to talk about is all of your role and how your role elevates me and complements what I need to do in the building. So if you want to switch over. So the best way to talk about legislation, there's an art to drafting. I know that seems like a silly thing to say, but because we're thinking about what our problem is, we're asking a question, and how you ask that question goes a long way towards your solution and what you propose as your solution. And I'll just say, just because I can, keep it in mind that not every solution not every problem begs a legislative solution. So we're changing master general laws. That's our path. But I just want to say that out loud to you, is that I think the gut instinct is, I'm going to file a bill, and that's not always the best solution. But in this instance, that's the choice that we've made. And there's a real art to drafting. So you've asked your question, you're thinking about what is the problem we're trying to solve. And here, the struggle we're having is diminishing revenues over time are not giving us the ability to sustain our services at the point when everyone's really calling for the services. And we could have a whole nother panel discussion about local media and the weeklies and the daily papers. And you guys are like the last defense. You're the last real piece on transparency and engagement at the local level. Because we can't ask the Globe to do that. We're not going to ask the Patriot Ledger to do that. But it's you guys. You're there. So at this kind of moment, now we're seeing the revenues diminish. And I think what was really interesting about what we did was we asked the question, but we also looked deeply, and we see that that what's really going on is new technology, which is exciting and innovating, and you're embracing, but people are switching, right? So it's in that moment of consumers are accessing the same services, but in a different mode. And really what this is, so when we were approaching the drafting, it was really about how do we keep that same customer base, and those same services that are being provided, just in different mechanisms and in different venues, how do we continue to capture those revenues that rightly track with what we're doing, right? And that was the cable franchise laws. That's how, right, the 5%, they're accessing and availing themselves of our local municipal rights of ways, and that's how they're reaching their customers. And all we're saying is, okay, that's fine, but we've spent a lot of money and you should be investing in that infrastructure too. And so we've tied those fees, that 5%, to that nexus, to the local programming and the infrastructure that you need to do on the local level. And all we're saying here with this bill is, and we're making choices, how now those people are cutting, they're moving away from cable, and how do we follow them, and how do we keep those services paying into the system in the same way? And I think what Mass Access proposed was actually really brilliant. One of the other key pieces when you're doing these kinds of things is you look to your subject matter experts, and that's you. You're all the subject matter experts in Mass Access and David. And I should pause and say, very strong subject matter experts, very strong partners, which is what I attribute all of the success we had in really elevating that bill. No bill gets filed and passed in the same session. It's just on very rare occasions, very unusual for that to happen. But by the end of the session, there was a lot of discussion around, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The other thing I just want to say is that when you embark on something like this, so you're availing yourselves of your subject matter experts, but you do also use other subject matter experts. So, for example, Mass Access engaged a telecom lawyer, brilliant guy, has his finger on the pulse of the law. I can sit here with all confidence and say to you the choices that we made absolutely are legal. We're threading a needle. We're making an argument to expand those cable franchise laws onto the streaming digital service entertainment providers, and hence the problem with the name. But you're going to think of something more creative that speaks to the value of what we're doing, right? And then there are other relationships that we will avail ourselves. In this business, relationships matter. I have to say it again. Relationships absolutely matter. The relationships you all have with each other and your neighboring centers, media centers, because if you stick together, they can't ignore you. Relationships that you have both with me as the bill filer, but also relationships that you have with your own legislators. Setting aside House 130, you absolutely should positively know all of your selectmen, all of your school committee members, you should know your town manager, and you should know your state rep and your state senator. Now, I'm not saying you have to go in there and be like, hey, and always be pestering or always, but they should know who you are, and they should know what you do, and they should value your work. Because what happens is when you file 7,000 bills and we're scrambling for trying to get our time in the sun, and we're asking people to support, you want to be able to know your state legislators well enough just to send a quick email and say, hey, Matt, could you get in there and do X? Or, Joan needs you to, just to sign on to this. And there's lots of ways that we all come together. But when it's like anything else, if you guys are sticking together and you're out in the field and we start to bring it in, people will start to pay attention because they start to hear about it. And it's the art of drafting, it's the art of creating the solution, it's the art of the buzz, and that's where you all come in particular. I like to talk about it as making choices. There's lots of different ways that you can take these things, both on the solution side, on the filing, on the strategy, and it really does start with the choices you make. And you chose to update an existing framework. You chose to really thread that needle and not to go. And I think what was smart about that is you chose to really focus on the nexus between the work that you do and you're making the case. And I think that piece of it really has gone a long way. You can have a worthy goal, but that's not enough. We're changing mass general laws, and I really feel like when you're thoughtful and make choices about the mechanisms, when you're thoughtful and make choices, even if we decided we're creating something new, you have to be able to make the case, and I think you've done that really well. People like me don't just say, yeah, sure, I'll file you a bill. If you're all in, I'm all in, so.
Some do.
Yeah, some do. That's true. That's true. That's true. Well, it's hard to say no to good people, but I'm all in. So, do you guys have any questions about sort of that? No. Okay. Oh, sir.
Ed Dugan, Berkeley Community Access TV. And that is, for us, that's one thing you mentioned was the trick is to how to make it sound valuable to the town. As an example, I had asked our selectmen to write a letter to the legislature,
Yeah.
which they did,
Great.
and and in the meeting, asking them to do this, I had the finance committee guy behind me going, it's just a money grab. And so how, I mean, I understand one thing, like you said, to get in contact with people, stay in contact with people and that sort of thing. But what's the message, do you think?
So
that we're giving them?
yeah, we're going to talk about that as we move through the presentation. But you're asking the exact right question. What's the message here? And the message here is sustainable revenues. That's what the message here is. And we're trying to make the case that, I would love all of our municipalities to be able to say, yep, sure, no problem, we got you covered. But there's a lot of demands on local government for services. There's a lot of competing demands at the state level for services as well and for those budget items. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this is we're tracking and we're connecting the asks that we're making on this bill for revenues with the actual infrastructure, right? They're availing themselves of our infrastructure, and but for that, they wouldn't be reaching Massachusetts customers. And so that's one piece of connection, but it's also connected to the work that you do and the program at the local level. And that's the ask is really, it's for sustaining revenues. I'm always open to other ideas about how to fill that delta, but we projected this would be about an additional $65 million to share statewide, and that we felt that would close the gap and then trend with us into the future. And so, I think that's the gap that we're trying to meet.
I'd also add, Ed, that you could challenge nicely the financial person in the town. Just give them the numbers, right?
Give them the numbers.
Right. If how much of your budget would you say comes from franchise fees? Probably up over 90%, right?
All of it.
Yeah, right?
Right.
So closer to 100%, right? And then you
Right.
say, okay, well, statewide, cable subscriptions have gone down 25% in the last 5 years. You could give them the numbers specifically for Berkeley. I could give them to you. And then have him do the math.
Yeah.
All right? We're not money grabbing here. We're trying to address an issue. So as cable revenues go down, this revenue goes up, hopefully.
Yeah.
And we're maintaining a level means of funding.
And
To
this
continue
is,
doing what we're doing. We're
Right.
not trying to do anything different.
and this is money that's coming in from a non-municipal revenue source, so he should be pleased with that. So, yeah.
I pointed out to that, kind of in that same vein, I've had the discussion with my FinCom chair multiple times. He said, well, you're using, you want to use our funding to do this. I was like, well, it's funding that's available for us already. You haven't spent a dime. The municipalities haven't spent money on our services, period. We're providing a service that does not cost them anything. It's not costing taxpayers, it's costing consumers, cable providers. So that's a clear distinction for me. When you show them the drop
Right.
in revenue from a source that they're not providing already, they start to connect the dots that if they don't figure out a way to make up that revenue, they're gonna have to start paying for it out of the tax base.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just go through. So right now, your traditional cable is delivered through that public rights of ways that I was talking about. And right now, those alternatives, right? to the cable. So when people move away and cut the cable, they're moving to streaming services, and that's not currently contemplated by any of the federal or state laws. And so what we're saying is that those streaming service providers, those products that people want to purchase in Massachusetts, they rely on the local infrastructure the same way as the cable franchises do, and they should be paying in the same way. So in some ways, it's a fairness piece as well. Now, we all understand the cable would probably be like, yeah, well, we'd like out too, but the reality is that that this is important work, and that they you know, those cable franchise laws came out for reasons, and so we're pushing them in. And in the same way, you know, that's federally, you know, all understand that's federally mandated, right? And it's 5% off their gross revenues, and then, so what, and most of them negotiate directly with you, even though money might come in through the state, they negotiate directly with you. So the difference we thought would be easier, would be to reflect that rapidly changing, you know, consumption, right? That's what we're talking about, is just keeping pace and replicating a system that actually works and is, for the most part, pretty streamlined. And we're just adding on those people into the same thing. It's a reasonable ask. It really is. It's the same group of consumers. So in theory, there just shouldn't be, they shouldn't even notice it in theory. And it's connected to that identified need. I really think of that as the nexus. And just so we're all clear, there are case law, Wayfair case came out, and the state of North Dakota was South Dakota, dang, I never remember. One of those that's
cares,
like
right?
way in
Yeah.
the Northwest.
I'm that guy.
He's that guy. I used to be that girl, but I'm not anymore. But anyway, so what they were saying was, you know, Wayfair was availing itself of the rights of ways and the public infrastructure and to reach their consumers. It's the same theory of change. And so, you know, they were saying basically you're avoiding paying sales tax. That was the premise there. And so what they did was they went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically came back down and said, you shouldn't be able to dodge it. And so they've said very clearly, and I would point to some of the language in the opinion itself, and the lawyer directed us to this as well, is they're like, we're making money off of you because we don't have to pay taxes, and we're not gonna, and you can't make us. And the Supreme Court said, no, they can. That is well within the state's purview. Now, I do just want to emphasize, we are not taxing the internet, so don't worry about that. We're not taxing mass residents. What we are proposing is a 5% fee in the same, right, parallel, right, to the cable franchise laws on those services. And it'll come into the state through DOR, so they'll collect it twice a year. It'll get distributed in the normal channels. 20% for the state to run that office and to chase down all of the accounting and the reporting and all of the things and the compliance. 40% to come into the municipality, and 40% to come into the actual cable providers. We had a lot of questions around that last time, so we're gonna check back with the lawyer, but we're trying to honor the traditional model and to make sure that the money flows and actually reaches you. And so we're trying to keep it simple. It would be apportioned by population. So if you're Brockton, you're gonna get however many people live there. If you're Cohasset, you're gonna get however many few people get there. So we are trying to keep it proportional that way. And honestly, I think for the most part, the feedback we've gotten on the Hill has been simple, straightforward, updating an existing framework and moving forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So 40% that the municipalities will get to keep, does that need to be earmarked for paying style
Yes.
things, or does it
Yes.
go into the general fund?
No.
Okay.
It's what I would envision, money given for a purpose or money collected for a purpose must be expended for that purpose. So by doing this, the money needs to be expended in that way. Now, I have no idea what your individual centers, how you're done. So if it's contracted out, I would expect the money would follow the contracts just like they always do. If they're in, like Hull TV is it's just a department. It'll just come in, but it has to be expended for that purpose. They cannot divert it. And there's accountability through Division of Local
You're
Services.
smiling like you get a little something.
We heard a lot of stories last time. I know, it's like, this is the point where I'm like, maybe you don't want to be videotaping, but we did hear a lot of discussion about how it would flow and things like that, and we can definitely take a look at to make sure that it comes in, but at the end of the day, it must be expended for the purpose with which it's intended.
Right.
You can't divert it to, I can't even think of an example, to like, I can't even think of an example. Right, you can't buy health insurance with it.
So it's programming of.
Or infrastructure for, right?
Infrastructure for.
Right,
The traditional
right,
things that we
right,
cover.
yes.
This is where section 53F and a half comes in.
Yes,
And the cable-related purposes.
Yeah.
That intentionally broad term.
Yeah,
So say Kingston wanted to use their portion of it to build up infrastructure, fiber optics within the town that would help PAC TV send signals from one area to the other. That's okay,
Yeah.
sure.
right,
Could they push it and say, we're gonna put an IP phone system in the town hall? Probably, right? Close enough, maybe, but they can't put an elevator in the
Right.
town hall,
Okay.
right?
Right.
That's a famous example, and
Right.
why the law was changed in the first place. The unintended consequence of that law, as you recall, is the fact that we are now having to deal with town meeting in small towns because we used the word appropriated when the law was rewritten.
right.
And that's Senator Lovely's bill,
Right.
trying to get that one across. And once we do that, the funding system is then in place. It's
Right.
protected funds. So that's why this Senator Lovely's bill is such an important precursor to what we're doing here.
Right.
Because once that's settled and we're good and we're ironed out there, we have a nice funding mechanisms where it comes in, it can be a revolving fund, gets turned right around to your media center.
and that's part of the choice, right? So we're making a choice to slot ourselves in and to update an existing law that has been well vetted and that everybody understands. So like Division of Local Services is gonna understand this and they're gonna know how to handle it and they're gonna handle it in the same ways they always have been. Money dedicated for, then it becomes an accountability piece, but since you're local media and you'll be videotaping all of those meetings and town meeting as well, you're gonna know, because this all has to happen in open meetings as well.
So based on that, is it smart for you, us, whomever, to piggyback into that 40% that's going to the municipalities, the ideas of closed captioning and remote coverage? And
Sure.
all the things that the towns are now hearing from their
Yeah,
constituents, you better have this for us. And they're looking at us saying, why aren't you covering every single meeting and doing it in the hybrid mode?
right.
So
So
does that give more push to the bill?
I think so. So jumping ahead, when we were coming into the end, of session last year, like what was it? Would have been about June. And if you recall, we were pushing forward on a municipal bond bill, and one of my colleagues dropped Amendment 1 on top of that nobody caught, and it was to require all municipal meetings to have a virtual component.
We remember.
Oh,
Yeah. So when you guys all went, oh my
God.
God, and the select board members were going, he did what? What I did was I called the speaker's office and I said, you just created an unfunded mandate and I have the funding solution for you. And so I uplifted our bill as a solution. I was like, if you really expect that, here you go. Because otherwise you're just gonna hear about it next year from the auditor's office, from the Office of Unfunded Mandates. I said, but here's your funding. And so I used that opportunity to really get us up there to make sure everyone understood what we're doing and what the value of the bill is. Like, we get the value of the work you do. The question is, are we going to pay for it? And so I think, at least on the House side, because I'm a House member, it's a House bill, I'm talking to House leadership, and Senator Lewis, who's terrific. We can talk about the path of that bill later, but so it was on me to do that. And they were like, got it. They get it. The House gets it. House leadership gets it.
Can you just talk about
Mhm.
how important it is to have the support of leadership in order to
Yeah.
get a bill passed?
So, 7,000 bills got filed last session. And what happens is and I can talk through the legislative process with you in a second, but basically what happens is you file your bills, they get assigned to committees, and the process itself is designed for the vetting of it and when things move forward. But when you're coming down into the end of session, formal session always ends on July 31st of the following year. And when you're coming down, it's just like now all of those bills are kind of like winnowing what went to study, winnowing, winnowing, and then it's just sharp elbows to try to highlight your own bill. And so what was so important about what happened with us last session was I had that opportunity. I went and saw the speaker. I told him it was my number one priority. I talked to him. He saw it was ready. But then you still have to make room for yourself as things are coming along. And so essentially what happened for us was as we came down, I got their attention, but the Senate chair of the committee, and they had said that the bill could advance to House Ways and Means, because it's a money bill, right? So it goes to House Ways and Means, that's its next path. And they said the bill could advance, and it comes from leadership. It has to come from the leadership to say that, because in that space, it'll just go into a black hole. So you have to find a path to the floor, and that was what I was trying to do. And unfortunately, the Senate chair had been part and parcel of some really big initiatives, the Votes Act. He was one of the authors of the Votes Act. So we tried to catch him sort of in a little moment where it was just a downtime for him, and he's like, I have questions. And in that moment, we're like, well, will you still be okay having that dialogue advancing? And he goes, well, you can advance it, I'm gonna vote no. And that was my choice to let it go to study. I just want it on the record. I decided that was me. Because I thought it was more important that we not entrench a no vote, that then you have to really work hard to get past, and to say, I respect your questions, I honor your questions, and I'm gonna meet with you offline afterwards. And leadership agreed, they were fine with it. Because the House chair was still good with it and what have you, so. So I did just wanna pause for a second, because we have a special guest in the back. Senator Patrick O'Connor. Hey everybody. Pat, do you want to come up and just say why you love community? Why you love Harbor Media and all of your community media centers? So.
Sure.
Yeah, come to us. Yeah.
Thanks.
There
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for being a little late. We had a couple other events this morning, but I wanted to make sure I got here and just to express my support for everything that Mass Access does and every single one of our community-based broadcasting stations do. I was just on with Jonathan last week, and we were able to put that out there. You know, when you look at what's happening in the sphere of local news, it's really dwindling down. You see what's happened in Gannett Publishing just the other day, laying off a large majority of their workforce. Okay. When we look at our local newspapers and what they used to be compared to what they are now, it's not even close, just in the 6 years that I came into office. And so being able to have an outlet to get news out on a local basis is incredibly important. I think more so now than ever before. And what you're able to do is take that new medium where, you know, you have a younger generation that are less likely to be reading the traditional newspapers than, you know, our older constituents. And so you're taking that new medium to them, being able to broadcast it through the internet, be able to share through social media. And it really is a huge tool for us to be able to continuously inform our constituents and residents about what's going on Beacon Hill, because as it's dwindled down to the local level, it's also completely dwindled down at the state level. We have, I remember when I was up there as a staff member for the now Mayor Hedlund, former Senator Hedlund, there was reporters from the Patriot Ledger that were up at the State House. We don't have that anymore. They rely on a lot of what the State House News does and other outlets. So there's not a lot of focus right now in general on what's going on in your local community or your state. And I think that that is very dangerous, considering some of the things that we've seen over the past, few election cycles, where people are utilizing misinformation or the inability to find information to their favor in political campaigns and in different, culture wars that we have going on right now. So I think that what you all do is vital to the fabric of our communities, to be able to continuously, present people who are doing great things in our community, present news that's out there, take the lighter side of things and really create a robust programming that will be able to assist our constituents and residents. So I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that you do and why I wanted to be here today to support my colleague, who I know is the legislator of the year for this organization, which I think is very well deserved. Joan does an amazing job and has really put this on the forefront as far as the issues with franchise fees and other things that are going on that need to be addressed. And I do agree that something has to be done to continuously put more financial resources into our community-based programming, because, as I said, it's high time that we need to get more investment, I would say, just in general, into our local news. So, thank you.
Oh, yay. And we also
I
have,
don't hear that very much when I
as long as you're supporting this bill, David, you are always welcome on the stage with me. Come sit down.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We were just talking a little bit about legislative framing and strategy, and just sharing a little bit about why you value our community media centers so much. And I do just want to point out, as he gathers his thoughts, that what this represents is collaboration within a Senate district, between the House and the Senate, but across the aisle, between Democrats and Republicans. And that's how we get things done, is when we work together, we're able to get things done. And this bill has absolutely positively got bipartisan support, and the Senate chair's distracted inability in that moment to engage should be nothing more than a thoughtful response to good policy making, because we absolutely have good support in the Senate. Senator Lewis is the other key. But did you want to just welcome and greet and?
Well, first of all, my name's Dave DeCoste. I represent Norwell, and I almost said Hanson. Hanson in spirit, Hanover, Norwell, and Rockland in the legislature. I apologize for being a bit late, but I actually had and this wickers right into Senator O'Connor and Representative Meschino. I had a little bit of a water issue that ran late, and I was working on some water issues. And as Rep. Meschino alluded to, we work together down here on all sorts of, you'd be surprised, there's very little difference of opinion when you get to talking about traffic and overbuilding and the importance of ferries and the importance of people with developmental disabilities. Senator O'Connor is probably I would say he is the leading advocate within either house for people with developmental disabilities. We have or nearby to his district in mind, both the Friendship Home and Cardinal Cushing. And I will say that probably in the House, representative with 160 reps, and more than any other representative, you hear Representative Meschino advocating strongly for everything that would benefit local media, because you folks do such a great job. Your access is, you bring visibility to things that nobody would know about, quite frankly, if it weren't for cable television, the access you provide, and just the terrific things you do to highlight all of the, hopefully mostly good things, and maybe some of the things that should bring concern you need addressing. So I appreciate Harbor Media for hosting this, and Rep. Meschino's advocacy for everything you guys were doing. And we hope maybe next year moving legislation sometimes a little bit like pushing the wet noodle. And it's there are things sitting there that if they were put to a vote, I think would easily get 160 to 0 in favor, and yet they just languish, and it gets a little frustrating sometimes.
So that's a great segue. Do you gents have a little bit of, do you want to hang with us for a little bit of time? Because I was just going to run down quickly what a legislative cycle the schedule is, but then we were going to open it up and talk about what our strategy could be. And right now what they're thinking about is how to be creative and think of a way better title than I pathetically offered, so that we can actually speak to the value of it. But do you gents have a little
Sure.
time to hang
Yes,
out?
sure.
And
Yep.
and we all understand the demands of your time, and at whatever point you feel like you need to get up and excuse yourselves, please don't think twice about it. But we were just gonna run through legislative advocacy and framing. I mean, I don't think it needs to go without saying, we've already sort of talked about it, the ideas need to be accessible, and consistent messaging, things like engaging a diverse range of supporters and your select board members, people who avail themselves of your services. Not for nothing, there's a whole bunch of people out there that are your vendors, and I think they make money if you make money and you're in service. Like, there's lots of a ripple effect, and so those are the kinds of things we should be thinking about as we think about our strategy. But we're still going to stay focused on our target audience, but we're going to think about who we can bring in, because sometimes government doesn't lead the change. Sometimes you have to call for it, and we'll be responsive to it. Just really running through very quickly so everyone knows what your timelines are. So this bill's gone to study, so it's done. We will refile it, and I'll be eager to hear your questions, and we're always listening for ways to improve it. But essentially, it's going to be the same bill we discussed before my colleagues got here, that we'll be refiling, hopefully with a new title. It will be assigned to a committee. We're updating, I think it's, chapter 166A, and so then we'll be adding 166B, which means it'll probably go to either telecom, utility, and energy, or it may go back to advanced IT again. It could go to revenue. It'll be up to the clerk. The first hearing, once it's in a committee, they'll start to set the hearings. We do these things by subject matter. They bucket them as subjects, and the hearings traditionally run, say May through November-ish. And then they try to take care of everything that's been timely filed, and then you see us continuing to do things throughout the session on the late filed bills, but this will be timely filed. Once we get through the end of the first year, you start to see us putting in deadlines to start to winnow things out. Remember, I was talking about how we sort of narrow things down to see if we can't create the path to the floor. And the first one is February, Joint Rule 10, and that's when the committee has to say, yay, we want this to advance, and this would advance to House Ways and Means, or nay, like, what were you thinking, Joan? Or more likely, a soft no, which is sent to study, try again, Joan. And yeah, sometimes they do give you a hard, like, seriously, stop. But that doesn't happen that often. So usually it's more of a, remember I was talking about having to be vetted, we don't think it's ready. And so, but oftentimes what will happen is for bills that they're interested in, like this one, they held it, and then they continue to work with you on it. At that point, we start to move into the end of formal session. It's always July 31st of the second year. And then if our bill is in House Ways and Means and still alive, we do always have opportunities to move things in informal session by acclamation, which is something we could do here because we have such great bipartisan support. And then at the end of session, it's usually the day before we get sworn, is everything dies and you start again. With this cycle, as I just pushed it out, there are opportunities for all of us to take some action. And so what I thought we could talk about a little bit today is what your role could be, and what are our opportunities to really highlight things. So our first opportunity
Sure,
is,
one quick question.
yes.
So going back kind of to the Civics 101, so
Yep.
last time around we had one bill go to advanced IT, one bill
Mhm.
go to TUE.
Yes.
How do bills get shifted to which, how do you guys figure out which bills go where to which committees?
So the clerk decides. So in this instance, we decided to file both a House bill and a Senate bill, and they were the exact same bills, although they had different titles. And so one of the things that the clerk in the Senate did was they sent it to Telecom, Utility and Energy, right, telecom, right, this is the telecom bill. And that was a big, that committee, this is a little bill, relatively speaking, and that committee was preoccupied with wind and climate. So you all saw that we did the wind and the climate bill. And so you didn't really see any other bills come forward out of that committee because they were really focused in on that subject matter, and sometimes that happens. I wasn't too worried about that, and Senator Lewis definitely got in there and advocated, but we got sent to a new committee. It was the first time, Advanced IT, and that was where the House bill, and it was the clerk's choice, and I don't know, we never really asked him why, because it doesn't matter why, because he gets to say that and do it. But oftentimes what will happen is the two chairs will discuss, should this be moved over to one or the other? And the House chair wanted to keep it. She didn't want to lose any of her bills, and she was interested in it from the start. So she chose to keep it right where it was, and sometimes they will get, they'll get discharged. Is that the right word, Pat?
Yep.
What you say? Is there advocacy opportunities around discharge? I've never tried to do that. I don't know if either of you gentlemen have.
No, I mean, it's kind of a split opinion on this. We've had bills that we filed that were sent in the House version to a different committee than the Senate version of the bill. Sometimes we think that gives us two avenues to go down rather than just the traditional one,
Yep.
but is also more work because then you're lobbying every member of two different committees rather than one committee. So there's pros and cons to both ways of that happening, but traditionally you get the bill that's sent to one, but there are some that may fit under, children's and families and children and people with disabilities, and it might have a legal component, so
Right.
judiciary might get it. So it's just
Yep.
it's really a crapshoot of where the clerk feels in both the House and the Senate it belongs with the two versions of the bill. Two different opinions of where it goes.
Yeah. But I would never argue with the clerk.
No.
That, you would never argue with the clerk.
Follow up to that, you mentioned something about like acclamation, because you've already done work on this, you might be able to move it in a different direction.
So what that means is that we do a tremendous amount of work when we're not informal, when we have informal session. They do a tremendous amount of work. But if one member on the House or the Senate side objects, that's it. It has to be 100% agreement and by acclamation. And I just use this as an example where we're working across the aisle and we have support across the chambers. That's the kind of a bill that in theory could, but this bill went to study, so that's not an option for us as we come down into the end of session. So it's just that's just the way it goes down. There's many paths, right? Wouldn't you say, gentlemen? Many paths. And part of the art of being a legislator is to sort of both create a path and follow a path, but also create a path at the same time. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah. But I think it's a great question, and it also lets me say that sometimes you just file a House bill, sometimes you just file a Senate bill, and sometimes you do mirror bills in both. And I don't know, do you guys have an opinion about this? We happen to have a great Senate partner in Jason Lewis. Very influential, very smart, very effective. So we went with both the two bills, but I have in the past filed just House bills, and I know you filed just Senate bills, so I don't know if you think there's any difference there. No.
The only thing, as you said, as soon as we know, I know there are a number of bills, Joan takes the lead on this particular legislation, but
Right.
all three of us have particular bills that
Right.
we try to move through, and again, some of these bills that you would think would have no, and they just linger. And that's from all perspectives. I think there are people on
Mhm.
both left, right, middle, both parties that are just frustrated with bills that really have no opposition and good ideas. But as soon as we know who gets good news on November 8th, I know on November 9th there are a few bills that we will be working on to make sure.
Yeah.
And maybe approach new members who are newly elected, and then go after the old stalwarts and make sure we're going to file this right away.
Yep.
First things, so be aware, can we count you, or in many cases, as a Republican, I try to get a Democrat to co-sponsor, particularly on those types of bills where it is really partisan. It's just what I would call good government. And this is one of those bills I would call good government. I don't think there's really an ideological slant to it. It's just kind of interesting we can't move it.
Well, great segue, David. That's where you come in. So within that schedule, there are many opportunities for you guys to uplift this bill and to help us sort of outside the building to really get people excited about it on the inside of the building. One of the first pieces is co-sponsoring legislation. Now, I'm of two minds of this. I will just own it. I co-sponsor almost nothing. And so I always find it a little hard to ask for co-sponsorships, but we're still going to do it because when you send that around to your colleagues, it's an opportunity for me to educate. I filed a bill, it's out there, and people will see it and just naturally go and co-sponsor it. But it's then also an opportunity for you each to have a conversation with your state legislators, and even though you have two of them in the room with you, you all should still call them and you should still call me and let us know that you support it or that you have a question or a problem with it. We want to hear that piece too. That's part of being a good partner, and that's part of being a subject matter expert, is that you're gonna look at it both with a positive frame, but also a questioning eye. And we want to hear both the good and the bad. We want to know what we're going to hear from the opposition. We want to be ready for that. But the first place to start is you have a chance to then go and educate each of your reps and your senators and just ask them to co-sponsor the bill. Now, if they don't go do it, I want you to promise me you're not going to be aggravated with them because I do not co-sponsor things. But you still want to approach me because then what it is now I'm aware of it and I'm going to follow it because you're my citizen, you're my resident, and it's interesting to you and you cared enough to take the time to come in and say it. Joan, I want you to support X. And I need to hear that from you. You'd be shocked at how many important bills there are up there that we hear from no one about. So I don't know, you like to hear from people, both pro and con? How do you like to hear from people?
Yeah, I mean, every avenue from email to phone calls. I mean, obviously, since the pandemic, it's not as many people that are going into the State House and actually, doing advocacy day or knocking on your door. There are some that still do that. Handwritten notes always go far. I read every single one of them. Not that I don't read every single one of my emails, but sometimes if you get a form email, you'll get 40 or 50 or 60 of them in one day, and it's kind of just, looking at that email and getting the response out as quickly as you can. But I think that there's many modes to get in touch with your elected officials. I do co-sponsor bills. I think that it's one of the things that we're able to do, so to do it. But I do respect Joan for not doing it because there are whatever it is, 4,000, 5,000 bills, and it gets complicated, and there's a lot. But it matters if we hear from 5, 6, 7 residents, especially if they're not form emails, if they're actual emails about why they need something. I read them all. My emails on my phone, my emails on my home computer. So that stuff really influences our decisions on what we believe is best for the people, the people of the district, and the quality of life for the people who live in the South Shore. And so things like this, make a huge impact when you get collective voices that are coming together in their own sort of unique perspective on why this bill should pass.
And you both do office hours, right? David, you're religious about your office hours.
On every Friday I do office hours, but to both Rep. Meschino and Senator O'Connor's point, I'm probably over the other side of the spectrum. I may co-sponsor too many things, but I know, for instance, again, subject matter experts, we have a representative down in Westport and another one over in Lakeville who are farmers, and between them and the Farm Bureau, I know to look through because they have a lot of important farm things, and I go and sponsor. I happen to be one of the 6 or 7 soldiers, service members in the legislature. I'm retired from the Army, so I take the lead on a lot of. We have a senator way out in Westfield, and one in South Boston in the Senate, and I always look at what they're sponsoring. It gives me an idea of where the veterans thing. And to your point regarding phone calls, I did get a communications from several members of Harbor Media, and so we went right on. And in addition, there you are. In addition to Joan, and we signed, I believe, we co-signed or signed on to a number of those things.
You were great.
So we, and we will, and if it don't, sometimes it's just a matter of a disconnect, but I'm not afraid to co-sponsor. Now, there's kind of an expectation, by the way, sometimes if you co-sponsor things that you're there to at least write a letter. And we don't always do that because, again, we co-sponsor, but it's good that, you know, when you have
Yeah.
our media folks that it's important to the communities, and certainly you're very important to Norwell. There's a lot of people, as I said, don't say this to ingratiate myself, but there are a lot of things that people would not otherwise know about were it not for the fact that you
That you
folks
call.
have it on cable.
Yeah.
I know my mother, who's 87, watches a lot of your stuff religiously, so you're doing a great job, and we want to make sure that, you know, you can do your job better and certainly not go away.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask just a quick question? Do you believe that this bill, possibly languished because we have an identity problem?
Nope, I
As
think.
far as the end user of the bill, because what I've heard from, we had a focus group done,
Ooh,
just 32 people, random people, we had a professional group do it,
yeah.
and so many of them had no idea what PAC TV is. You know,
Oh,
had no idea
gosh.
what you are, what you do, you're funded by the town, right, taxes, no idea how we're funded.
Yep.
And I know the people that love us, are the people that watch us continuously, but all the things that the streaming bill would allow us to continue with,
Right.
does that somehow need to be part of this conversation more than, oh my God, now whatever I pick for what I'm getting, my content, I'm
love
gonna
it.
get taxed on,
Mhm.
which is what we keep hearing, that
Right.
this is a tax.
Well, it
So
is a
it's two-part
tax.
question.
It is a tax. Don't dodge that piece of it. But it's a tax on like Disney or Netflix. Now, if they choose to push it through to their consumers, I mean, how they internalize that. But it's at the state level, and it's really about what their revenue is within the state of Massachusetts, right? Narrow, tailored nexus, right? And then there's safe harbor provisions. So if they didn't, I think it's like $125,000, like statewide. Like there's like if there's a small safe harbor provision in case someone got new into the business, we didn't want to kill business either. So we're really trying to be very thoughtful. But this is the kind of thing, a focus group could be really great. So the other opportunities we're gonna have, once we do our co-sponsorships, we're gonna schedule legislative briefings. And that's as much to highlight what you actually do and how fabulous you actually are. Wasn't it PAC TV that did the video with Rep. Muraturi? That
Our
went
last legislative.
for a last legislative briefing. That went over incredibly well. And it really engaged both representatives and senators and their staff. Don't forget the staff. If for some reason we're kind of scary, go to our staff, go to the staff. Well, you don't want to bug us. I hear that all the time. I don't want to bother you. Go to my staff. That's what they're there for. Trust me, anything you tell them, if you've got their heart and mind, you've got us. And so we'll have opportunities to really think creatively about how we do that in our first legislative briefing of the year. The other opportunity you'll have is testimony, both written and verbal. When it gets one hearing, that's your chance. And we should be thinking very creatively about both highlighting and showing the fabulous work you do, how important you are, let's just say public safety, right, during COVID, trusted sources of information, trusted sources for programming, transparency, that's a huge thing on Beacon Hill right now. You guys are transparency, because you're actually right there. And these are the kinds of things that I want you guys to all just really get creative about. Another thing I'll just say is, while I have the floor, is some of your centers are small, right? And so if you're Hingham, right, if you're Hingham TV, and you really want to get out there, bring the people around you that are smaller than you and maybe don't have the bandwidth. I guess, I don't know what the time is right now, but I just want to say, if we flip to the end, there's a funny little slide that says,
Wait.
nope, there, oh, David.
I blew it.
Keep going. There we go. We can totally do this, guys. Like, I'm sorry, you've got two legislators right here that are ready to work with us, and we can totally do this. I'm the one that has to figure out the path with my colleagues in the building. But I can only do that if you guys create buzz outside. get your selectmen excited about this. Get your school committees excited about this. Get your artists excited about this. Get all your vendors excited about this. The more people we hear from about the value of what you're doing gives us the ability to get in there and elbow other people out of the way. This is only so much bandwidth in the building. And our plan is to ask for an early hearing, we'll see. Our plan is to ask for an early disposition to give us a real runway. And every step of the way, you have to be right there with us, uplifting and propelling, showing us, and you're I am seriously the least creative person in this room. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I can own it, but you're the creatives, and what we're looking for you to do is, when David calls, do the things that are comfortable. If you're shy to call your state rep or state senator, send them an email. If it takes 5 seconds, we'll give you the text. You're always with your select board members. Take every opportunity to remind them. If Hingham is doing something and you're one of the surrounding communities, just sign on and join in. So maybe you don't have the bandwidth. There are things that you'll be comfortable, you'll have the capacity to do, and there won't be others. But when David calls and asks, do what you can, because there's going to be a long-term strategy here, and we're going to go for it because we can totally do this. Yeah.
You mentioned that one person decided not to support it because he said he had questions.
Yes.
Can you share with us what some of those?
So some of the questions that come up out of this bill is, because it's telecommunications, immediately everyone's brain says, oh, well, that's federal law, and they're concerned about preemption. That's why David and Mass Access hired the attorney, because he is an expert in telecommunications and exactly this in the cable franchise laws, and he's the one that helped us to craft. I mean, we're kind of threading a needle here, and we're the first ones across the United States to try to do this. Other states are actually trying to assess sales tax on the same group. We're proposing to do it a little bit differently because we actually have robust use of the cable franchise laws. Apparently other states do not. So other states are going for a straight sales tax. We're not doing this here, and the number one reason why is because sales tax goes into the general fund, and there's, I know it seems like we're washing cash. Isn't quite true, but there's lots of demands, and what we're trying to do is make that argument for the cable franchise laws and that update so that it is naturally connected to you. And to your earlier remarks about, your questions about how do we make sure the money comes and is spent for the purpose for which it's intended, that's what we're trying to do. So we're both trying to get the money, but also keep it on the path to you. Because trust me, I think if our colleagues figure out what we're doing, everyone's going to be like, well, hell yeah, let's do, So we're trying to do it before anyone wises up.
Quick question here.
Yeah.
So all you talked about engagement. So once you've signed on to a bill, how much engagement should we have with you, and what should that engagement look like?
Joan?
Let me start. I always say
This goes for any bill.
Yeah, any bill I would call, and then I would follow up if they don't do it. I mean, it depends on how I act. But as I said, when constituents, unless it's a bill that maybe I'm ideologically opposed to, I don't consider this a tax, by the way. I consider it a fee.
A fee.
All right?
Yeah.
I say, because it's voluntary. If you're not getting that, you're not
That's
paying
true.
it. All
That's
right?
true.
But I've taken a pledge not to raise taxes, so I don't generally do that. However, when
Right.
somebody, again,
It's a
when
fee.
I have a member of the
We used to call it
community
fairness fee.
who are community organization that really needs something, and that goes whether it's Friendship Home or Cardinal Cushing or a local manufacturer or just a community organization that needs it, housing. My particular area, I'm on the housing committee, we listen a lot to folks who produce housing, and so a phone call and a letter is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And again, if you're in office hours, it does not hurt to show up and say, can you co-sponsor this, and here's why it really needs it.
Oh yeah, name with a face is always good, right? Because then when you see the email, you remember. That's for sure. I personally like gentle reminders. No, it's just like, oh hey, and like this is, And remember, even if we don't co-sponsor, it doesn't matter. You're communicating with us. Hey, this is coming up on a hearing. Hey, Joan's doing a briefing. Oh, hey, if you could swing by. Oh, hey, if you could weigh in here, or just let her know. Just check in with her and let her know you support, like even if you're not co-sponsoring. So
if to your point, if I send you an email and you support and sponsor, but then you have office hours, and I just make an effort to come in and thank you for your sponsorship, for your support on our bill, does that
yeah.
help as well?
Doesn't hurt with me, because mine are usually lonely anyway. Come Tuesday night, we'll chat.
Yeah, I mean,
Haley,
it's like,
question too, when you get a
oh
second.
yeah, it's like when you're fundraising, it's like the seven touches to a check, or when you're trying to get people to vote for you, 7 touches to a yes, to a vote, right? And it's just the gentle reminders and the art of keeping things in the front of our brain when so many other things are trying to distract us. Because this is important, and you should feel okay about saying, and it's the gentle reminders. It's like, oh, hey, this has got a hearing. If you can, could you send a note to the chair? Oh, or I know Joan said there was a letter going around for sign-ons. If you could, if you can, do that thing. And it's like, it's just an excuse to keep it in the front of your legislator's brain. And then if I know your name and I put it to a face, and you're scanning through, thousands of emails sometimes? I mean, it's crazy how much email we get. And you stop on it, it's like, oh, David Gothier, I'm always going to read his email, right? Because I know him. But it doesn't mean I'm not reading everything else, because we really do read everything else. But it's about relationship building. So, yeah. And don't be shy. We're all really nice. Kaylee, and then we'll come over here.
I don't know if you touched upon this before, but when we're talking to committee members and stuff, what about, and I ask this question because I know I have a question. What happens if if this bill goes through, what if you get a streaming platform through your cable service?
So there's going to be different ways that that this will reach to you. And I think what we were trying to do is avoid all of that, right? Because there's lots of different ways it comes to you. But at the end of the day, whether it's through the cable platform, which is something that they're engaging services for, right? Or whether it's coming through streaming services and the antenna is on, Hull Municipal Light Plant's, infrastructure. What we're asking them to do is report their revenues to customers in Massachusetts. And that's how they're going to pay it, based on what their revenues are. So it could be that, in theory, you could think of all sorts of different flow charts that you're paying multiple places, but it's not, you don't think of it as, I have, what do I have? I think I have HBO Max, Netflix, and probably Disney, right? And so maybe I'm paying 3 more times, but really what it is I'm buying services, and the state is assessing the fee, the fairness fee, right? Is that what we're calling it,
Yes.
David? Fairness fee on, see, I can learn. And that's why we're doing this. It's to your focus group point, is at that almost like a wholesale level. So it's not necessarily going to translate down directly in every single way. It's going to be part of their cost of doing business in Massachusetts. And how they socialize that fee is going to be different among different providers and what have you. So, but they should be paying. If they're making money here off of Massachusetts customers, then they should be paying into it. And then what'll happen is it'll be distributed per capita, so by population. So if you're, I don't know, if you're the city of Boston and they like to have 6 different streaming services, but you're Cohasset and they don't like to use any because there's no terrible cell phone reception there, right? There is. I can. Oh, let's be honest. There is. Hingham's not great either, but so it will all even out in the wash, and we're trying to keep it within the framework. We're trying to keep it straightforward and not confusing and not onerous. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And let's remember, there is no cord cut, right?
There's no cord cut.
The
It's
cord remains the same,
right. It's yeah.
right?
Right.
So cord cutting as a term, as in vogue as it is, sort of works against what we're trying to say,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We're saying it's the same stuff,
Yeah.
same infrastructure,
It's the highway.
just different
It's
stuff.
the
comes in.
highway. I like that. Ooh, that's good, the highway. I'm gonna write that. So I always have the pen with me, the highway. I'm sorry.
We had a question back.
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
And then, yeah.
This might be a question for Senator O'Connor.
Uh-oh.
You were all referring to how to convince people of the need. And Senator O'Connor, I know she mentioned developmental disabilities is something you're working on, but, so I don't know if this would be a question for you or all of you, but as an example, I have someone in our town who used to go to every single town meeting. She's gotten older, she's got sick, she can't do it anymore. Now she's at every single town meeting, either through Zoom or watching it on cable. And we all know she's there. There's no question about it. What I'm imagining is the fact that some people have disabilities could be seen as another reason why, we can provide the service to those people in particular, who can't make it live.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, no, I think that the case that you make is very strong. It's getting that out there and advocating those points to the legislature as a whole. I think that going to if every single member of local media across the state went to their local state rep and state senate's office hours and said, "Here's something that we're focused on. We want to try and get this done this year," I think that would make a huge impact. As was talked about earlier. The same with email campaigns and other advocacy. And you can take different sort of viewpoints, and one being, hey, local news is dead. We're the only ones that are being able to get it out there to the masses and in different forms. Here's one example. We have an aging population in Massachusetts, unlike many other states, that now access for both individuals who are older as well as individuals with disabilities are becoming more of an obstacle from them being able to get to traditional town events, whether it be a town meeting or the high school puts on a play, and they typically would go to that, and now the only outlet they have is for local media to go and film that. I think that that's another sort of route to take, and just say, hey, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet points as far as why this will happen. I don't think that it's going to be, and I know that you talked about the focus group, I don't think it's going to be the merits of investing in local media. I think it's going to be figuring out the balance of being able to do what is discussed in the bill as far as taking the revenue from these streaming services and placing a fee on that, and then calculating and figuring out the mechanisms of how that all actually happens. I do think that it's going to happen at some point in time, just because it happens everywhere. You look at I would liken this to sort of the tax on the internet back in the day, when the internet tax was not being collected by states, and all states had to catch up really quickly and try and figure out how to do that with eBay and Amazon and other ones that are just going through their business cycle. And so I think it's going to happen, and I think the local media will benefit from this. It's just how to put all of that infrastructure, fee taxing infrastructure in place at a state level to do it. And then also, as Joan said, we're going to be the first ones to do this. So, they're going to make sure that they get it right as well. A&F and other agencies deeply involved in it.
And we do have a legal opinion that's crafted, and I think that was really where the questions came around was this preempted? Absolutely not. In the absence of federal action, we can take this action. But I do think that I think it requires really kind of a little bit of a deep dive on the part of the chairs and the committee staff. And I think I think that a lot's happening at the end of session, and it's hard to get people's solid 100% attention, and that's why I chose to respect. I chose to respect it, because I wouldn't want to be railroaded that way either, and I would always rather bring you along and educate you and bring you along with me rather than have to overcome a no. And I would never have disrespected the center that way. As he said, I had questions, and that's on me to get back in there. And Jordy and I actually were trying to get time with him now, so just so you all know, I'm not letting him off the hook. So you haven't asked a question yet.
I
Yeah.
have, first I want to thank you for answering the preemption question, because that's one I heard and I was
Yeah.
really curious.
It's not preempted. No.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
There is one way that this seems to be different from the way federal cable money is allocated. And I want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
I'm from a region that has wide seasonal swings, so our cable money is very dramatically quarterly, and
interesting.
our capital funds have to be negotiated based on this average population.
Right.
So we don't have a fixed population. So I'm hearing that this is collected on revenues statewide, but distributed on local population. How is that definition of population?
It's a great question. We'll have to take a look at
That is
that.
a good
But traditionally, when we say population, it's where's your primary residence and where are you voting? Yeah.
For a region like us, when you look at consumption,
Right.
it's very, very different.
Different.
We have towns that go from 3,000 to 35,000.
Yeah. Hull's the same way. It's seasonal. That's an interesting question. I will say that we should keep in mind that the more complicated we make it, the harder it will be. But one of the things that your question begs is that there are apparently a lot of different contractual relationships relative. So just using Hull, a neighbor as example, it's a department, and they have space in the schools and the town hall, and it just goes into the department, and that's what they use it for whatever the needs are in that moment, whether it's programming or whether it's capital. But then for like Hingham, right, here they have a great contractual relationship both with two communities, both Hingham and Norwell. So we're trying to find the simplest way to honor those the existing relationships and not disrupt them, because we cannot disrupt them. And so that's been the way, and that's why we were saying by population, because then at least we're trying to keep the fairness piece in there, and to honor the existing relationships and not disrupt the important contractual obligations you have. So not all of the contractual relationships are as well structured and maybe as could be revisited, but I can't do that. I can't interrupt your contracts. I can't interrupt your relationships, nor should we. That's really on the local level to sort of figure it out. So you haven't asked a question yet, and then Katie.
Okay.
And then I know there's
just
two others.
Really quickly, any kind of a, is it more important to get a letter like from Board of Selectmen in support of the work we're doing, or individual members? You know what I'm saying? Do you give more weight to boards and committees? Because I would just say, having sat on the school committee for a number of years on the other side of the camera, and knowing Westboro TV was out there, and now being in the role that I'm in and not on the committee, I always said to people, even if you don't watch those meetings, you're so glad that Westboro TV is there and filming them, that Local Access is there filming them, and also now I see it a lot, but I saw it when I was there, our ability to run the town, those different committees and boards to talk to each other and know what happened at the meetings, be able to go back and reference that from each other's meetings, just really critical to the town being able to function. So just wondering, my Board of Selectmen very supportive of us, school committee very supportive. Is it helpful to get those letters? Is that more weight to those letters, or should I be telling them just write your own individual letter?
I think you have to suss out your individual circumstances. If your board is, select board is all on the same page and you can get that letter from your chief elected officials, I think that's fantastic. And don't forget the school committees, right, because they value that too, and I think that's also a weighty elected officials. But if you don't think you can get it, or it's not something that board's culture does, or if they're like in the middle of a huge fight, whatever, do what works for you. I can't remember who it was that said to us at the end last time, they were thinking about getting a town meeting, what do you call it? Oh my God.
Warrant?
No,
It was like a proclamation.
a proclamation, a town meeting proclamation, like more of a resolution, thank you, yes. And so someone was like, I'm gonna go and get the town meeting resolution, to support this. So, I mean, I think I thought that was an interesting way to do it. I think the select board is always, I always take note of my select boards, gentlemen. Your own
We've got
thoughts on
about
this?
3 or 4
About
minutes.
5
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
your
I gotta
thoughts
sneak
on
out of here
this?
till
Yeah.
noon. I think that any sort of correspondence whatsoever, whether it be as the group of them or them individually, would make a big impact. And I would say that if they do approach and endorse this issue, I would send that correspondence both to the committee that the bill's in, as well as to their local legislators, so that the
Yeah.
local legislators know that the main local elected officials in their communities are backing this. I mean, that is the way in which all of this happens, is to build that grassroots advocacy, both from mass access and all of the local partners, and then to expand out into the school committees, the select boards, other organizations, former state representatives and state senators, and really just build that trust that can be then
Yep.
delivered to the legislator in a way that hopefully gets them to support the bill, co-sponsor
Right.
the bill, do something positive with the
Right.
bill.
Yeah. I think we only have like 2 minutes left. So are you guys feeling energized? Are we gonna do this?
Yes.
All right, no, I need to hear it. I don't, yes, all right. Can we give Senator O'Connor and Representative DeCose a special round of applause for staying with us this whole time? And I'll hang out for a little bit longer because I know there were other people that had questions here, but I think we should also give David Gauthier for organizing. And with that, I'm just gonna say, we're gonna do it. Yay! Thanks, everybody.